Brandon Aiyuk is back and ready to go in week 1 with the 49ers, but he shouldn't be in your starting fantasy lineups. We discuss our biggest fantasy fades of week 1 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. It's week 1. We're officially here. We have a game tonight, Chiefs versus the Ravens. So excited. If you're new here, welcome. We will, help you win your fantasy championships every single week. We are here every single day of the week as well. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. Excited for Chiefs Ravens. A lot of easy decisions to make with your lineups tonight, but some harder ones to decide here for the weekend games with potential sits that we normally wouldn't. So we'll take all those into account on today's show.
Yep, we'll go through our biggest fades of the week at all positions. We already hit on all of our favorite plays of the week. So if you missed those shows, they're Monday through Wednesday. We hit on our favorite running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks and tight ends. So go listen to those episodes. Before we start today, I want to remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win. Just win $50 instantly when you play $5 over at Prize Picks. All right, let's get into the wide receiver fades of the week because I think these are the more interesting choices here. And you will have to make these decisions, right? So Brandon Aiyuk, he gets the New York Jets week 1. He has not practiced all summer long, right? He signed it was last week he signed. He's just starting to get going. And unfortunately, he has to see Sauce Gardner in week 1. Can you play him? I mean, you drafted him early enough where you're going to want to, but I think it's going to be a really rough week for Aiyuk in week 1.
Yeah, first of all, some of these guys you might need to play just because of the depth of your league. But this is also telling you lower your expectations. You might need to find your points elsewhere if you need to rely upon these players. And definitely these are players you don't want to be targeting in DFS. So getting that out of the way, looking at Brandon Aiyuk, yeah, I don't love this matchup at all for him. He's rusty. And you have this Jets secondary. Now, you expect him to be mainly on the outside. You have DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. Those are two very good corners. Michael Carter is really good in the slot as well. You don't expect Aiyuk to see a lot of him, but they'll move him around trying to get him open. The problem is all three of these guys are very good. The Jets have a very top-notch secondary. There's no outlet for Aiyuk, right, if he's not getting the deep shots downfield. Good news for Brock Purdy is that Trent Williams will be in pass protection, but this Jets pass rush is still very tough inside with Quinn and Williams. So he's not going to have a lot of time to sit back there and throw downfield. So all these factors, the coverage, the time for Purdy's pressure, all these things don't really add up to a Brandon Aiyuk game, so to speak. I think it's going to be more short and intermediate. So that should probably favor Deebo Samuel a little bit more and Christian McCaffrey, of course, out of the backfield.
Yeah, the Jets secondary is just no joke. They allowed 17 fantasy points per game to the entire wide receiver position last year. Like the next closest, they were by far the best. The next closest was the Chiefs at 22 points per game allowed to wide receivers. It's just unfair with what they have back there. So I'm out on you, Aiyuk. I'm not out on Deebo, though. I mentioned this. I think they're going to utilize him, target him heavily. The Jets, one area you can beat them is yards after the catch. And when you look at the wide receivers that did well against the Jets last year, they were gaining those yards after the catch with Jalen Waddle with 72 yards after the catch. In one game, you played him. And then Khalil Shakir putting up 70 yards after the catch. And Tyreek Hill doing the same thing against them. Those are all the guys that had good fantasy weeks against the Jets. I expect Deebo will be just fine. Now, what about Garrett Wilson on the other side? The 49ers, the sound of their defense is oh no. And they are a good defense at holding, not allowing a lot of points, not allowing a ton of yards, but they can be beat by wide receivers. So I think I still am willing to, obviously you're playing Garrett Wilson. You drafted him at the end of the first, early second round, but I still think he can have a solid of enough game where he doesn't disappoint you too much.
Yeah, I think he'll be okay. I wouldn't expect too big of a game from him. We'll see how it works with Aaron Rodgers. Hopefully, he'll stay healthy through a week one game for more than a series. That'll be great. So he's on the field. But again, it's not as bad with Tyrod Taylor. He's still going to do something if something were to happen to Rodgers. Let's not think that way. Wilson is a great talent. He should see quite a bit of Travarius Ward, but Ward is not necessarily a super shutdown guy all the time. And Wilson is a plus plus talent here in relation to Aiyuk. So when you look at that, I think Wilson can be schemed open a little bit better in this game than Aiyuk can.
Yeah. Now, 2 guys, I was thinking Drake London, maybe, maybe you don't have to play him this week, but you do because for some reason I'm still thinking about Drake London as a later round draft pick, right? But now this year with all the hype with Kirk Cousins, you had to take him in the second round. You're obviously going to play him because you expect him to have a really nice season. I'm going to just say I'm scared for him in week 1 against the Steelers because that Drake London's such a clear wide receiver 1 and the Steelers have such a clear cornerback 1 and Joey Porter Jr. I just expect Joey Porter Jr. to be shadowing Drake London. And the one thing about Porter Jr. is that he's great in coverage. And when he does get beat, he's going to hold you. Like he's going to just let the flag come. He's going to get the penalty instead of letting you catch that ball. So I think this is the Kyle Pitts game. I don't think Drake London's going to have too great of a game that you just really have to temper expectations. Obviously, maybe you can have a big play or 2 and completely, make me look stupid.
Well, I think the biggest thing here also the pressure, right? It's going to be coming on Kirk Cousins. We know how good they can be with T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith, and you have Porter on the back end. They did get Patrick Queen at linebacker, which is going to help them a little bit with the coverage, but I would still think it's underneath, and Bijan Robinson getting those shorter passes as well as pounding him a little bit, as well as throwing to Kyle Pitts, who's a little bit banged up going in this game, but Pitts will be featured a little bit more. Kirk Cousins definitely a little rusty on a new team with a torn Achilles, hasn't had a lot of action here. So again, be careful about this passing game, especially the downfield version of the Falcons. But I can see short to intermediate to start this game, and it'll be an interesting game to watch. It's one of the more exciting potential games at the 1 p.m. schedule to kind of learn a lot about these two new teams.
Yeah, I mean, going into that game, you just have no idea what to expect really from
Yeah.
either team. It's kind of wild. I'm excited, obviously, as a Steelers fan to watch it. Now, one game, I'm trying to just stay away from the passing attack on both sides of the ball. Honestly, I'm happy to play the running backs, but the wide receivers, I'm really fading. And that starts with Calvin Ridley for the Titans, and then DJ Moore for the Bears in that Bears Titans matchup. I expect this to be a low-scoring game. That's why I'm happy to play DeAndre Swift or Tajay Spears or maybe even Tony Pollard. But when it comes to the DJ Moore side, in games he didn't get at least 9 targets last year, he was abysmal. Like he was not playable, basically, right? I just don't think he's going to get that target share right off the bat with Caleb Williams in his first game. We'll see how Caleb Williams can perform in week 1. And then with Calvin Ridley, against this tough Bears defense that was so good at the second half of last season, probably we'll see a lot of Jalen Johnson on him as well, who is one of the best cover corners in the league. I just don't trust Will Levis against the Bears defense.
Yeah, and the thing about this is another tough situation. The Bears have Montez Sweat. They can put on some pressure here with a rotation of sack artists that they have now for Matt Eberflus. And then not only Jalen Johnson you got to worry about, but Tyreek Stevenson is a rising star on the other side here for the Bears. So it's going to be tough for Calvin Ridley to get going. I think the one saving thing could be moving around a little bit. The team expects to do that a lot more than the Jaguars did. I think they'll move him inside, which gives him a shot here. He did play the slot quite a bit in Atlanta, so that gives him a shot against Kyler Gordon. So that could give him some plays, but I don't expect him to be consistently lining up there, and I don't expect a lot of points from the Titans through the air. Now, when you look at the other side of this, I actually like DJ Moore maybe a little bit more than you do, but this could be tough still because you have L'Jarius Sneed, they acquired him in a trade from the Chiefs. Chidobe Awuzie. These are two kind of veteran corners that we want to see what they can do in this particular defense under Denard Wilson. So, again, a lot of wait and see. These new pieces, new offenses, all these schemes, and these two teams are no exception. So, again, if you can afford to wait and see, you might have to do it with these type of teams.
Yeah, and you probably can, right? Unless you're in a deep league. Like if you're over 12 team league, then no, you're going to be playing your Calvin Ridleys and your DJ Moore, and it can work out just fine. But if you're in a 10 team, even maybe a 12 team, you might have that depth, especially if you went heavy with wide receivers. And I'm okay sitting these guys and waiting to see how they're utilized in their offenses before I plug them in, especially in a game we think is going to be super low scoring. We're going to get into some running backs that we're fading this week. A lot of those hard backfields to just figure out when you start, and then one top tier running back that you're obviously playing, but I'm kind of worried about the production he puts up in week 1. We'll get into that right after our quick break. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 players on their stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. This is, I think, absolutely huge. So with this policy, if your lineup stays in play, even if one of your players gets injured, so if a player leaves in the first half, it's not like, my player projections, my fantasy lineup is ruined, right? You can still hit on the rest of your players. And also, you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You get one for free, right? Because right now through the month of September, for the next 4 weeks, Caleb Williams has 1 yard you need to hit. That's it. One Caleb Williams passing yard throughout every week in September. So that's all he has to hit, and you automatically win that player projection. So that's one of your 4 or 5 picks right there. Some other player projection picks I like for week 1. Jaden Reed, more than 45.5 rushing plus receiving yards. And then also Mike Evans, more than 68.5 receiving yards. To get in on the action, just download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 off instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, the Prize Picks app, and again, Locked On NFL. Go have some fun this weekend. All right off the top here, Vinny, with our running back fades. And again, he's going to be in your lineup. I'm still saying he's making me nervous this week, and it's Breece Hall against the 49ers. We know how inconsistent he's been throughout his career, right? Huge boom games in fantasy, but also a lot of games where he's disappointed. He scored 12 or fewer points in nearly 50% of his career games, 9 points in nearly 40% of his career games. Now he gets the 49ers tough run defense. No player put up at even 90 rushing yards against them in any game last year, and only 3 running backs scored 15 plus fantasy points against them in a game last year. This is a tough matchup for him in week 1.
Yeah, he's a bit of a different receiving back first kind of player, so that helps him, right? But you do have Fred Warner in coverage. He's one of the best, maybe the best that we've seen in quite a while covering running backs. But it's Breece Hall, right? He's a special talent. They'll try to scheme him open. You have Aaron Rodgers back there, so you're going to be a little concerned just in case Aaron Rodgers takes those deep shots, right, to Mike Williams, who's going to be available to him. So that could help stretch the field a little bit, create some underneath work there against the zone. But I think he's going to have to count on a lot of his receiving ability in this one because it's going to be tough to run on the 49ers. I think it's going to be a little bit easier for Christian McCaffrey to get it done on the ground and also pad his stats here with receiving. So right off the bat, it's very interesting that we have the 2 arguable best fantasy running backs in the same game playing 2 tough defenses. McCaffrey will fare much better. I think Breece Hall, I think his ceiling is just too high to drop him too far down early in the season. So I expect Breece Hall to be okay. I could see a scenario where he gets to 100 yards from scrimmage, just kind of puts it together. Maybe inefficient, maybe without a touchdown, but that's where it's going to probably be for Breece Hall this week.
Yeah, I still have him ranked as running back 8. You still have him at running back 4. I might end up moving him down a little bit, though. I know how elite of a talent he is. I just don't expect a great fantasy week from him in week 1. Now, like, we have a lot of backfields that we don't know how they're going to be utilized, right? Starting with the Bengals, and let's discuss that. They get the Patriots, which is kind of an unfortunate matchup, right? They allowed just 3.4 yards per carry to running backs last year, second fewest in the NFL. And we don't know how the Bengals are going to utilize Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Now, there's a 0% chance I'm playing Chase Brown in this matchup, right? I still will throw Zach Moss in, expecting low end RB2, top end RB3 type of production. But I don't expect much more than that. I don't think this is going to be a high scoring game. This Bengals offense could start slow like they do pretty much every year because Burrow's always coming off an injury. So again, I'm not excited about this backfield. I'll consider Zach Moss if I need an RB2 or a flex play, not Chase Brown.
Yeah, it's not the most exciting matchup for a team that's favored by almost 10 points, right? And a lot of it is because the Patriots offense stinks and the Bengals defense can be pretty good. They'll contain them. So, yeah, I think the Bengals, any chance they get in a matchup like this, are going to throw the ball. And they can be had on the back end. The Patriots have had some personnel losses. They don't have J.C. Jackson back there. There's a lot of question marks about this defense, not knowing exactly what you're going to get here from Gerard Mayo, and they'll look at it without Bill Belichick. So again, a lot of unknown quantities. So stay away from this type of situation, right? Moss and Brown. I think if you're desperate, you can play Moss. I think it's going to be the same case that we consider with the next guy we'll talk about. But yeah, it's really hard because there's so many things we're not sure of. And week one gives us a little clarity, but we need that sample size really to feel good about these kind of shaky situations.
Yeah, and I will say, and we know I'm the Zach Moss stan, right? I
Yeah.
love him. He is going to be in my lineups. Like I
Yeah.
drafted him in most leagues. I'm still going to throw him in. It's not a week I expect a huge performance from him, but I think he'll still be all right. Now, I do have these guys ranked back to back. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Moss is at my running back 30, and Singletary is my running back 31. We're both expecting Singletary to struggle this week against the Vikings. They were a stingy run defense last year, fifth fewest yards per carry allowed to running backs. And we still don't know, like, can Singletary handle the goal line work? Will they give that to him? Or is that going to be Daniel Jones's job? We don't really know. So again, I would love to play the wait and see approach with Devin Singletary. If you had to go with Moss or Singletary in your lineups this week, which one would you go with?
I would go with Singletary only because he's a volume-based player, right? I mean, that's for our hope for Singletary all season long, to be honest with you. Like, if there's not the volume and we see Eric Gray and Tyrone Tracy Jr. start to become factors in situations, including the passing game where Devin Singletary is a zero factor, he's not very good at that spot, then we're going to worry here. But at least I know Singletary is going to see the majority of his team's touches. Brian Dable's hinted at that. The matchup isn't great, so if you can pivot off of it, I'd rather go with someone in a better matchup. But again, if you had to go volume and just a guy that's going to touch the ball a lot in week one, I think you go here. Although, again, it could be very, very ugly, the stat line in the end, but at least you know he's probably going to get 15 to 20 touches easily in this game.
Yeah, he will. And I also think Moss will, though, as well. Right.
We'll see.
But that one's a little bit more concerning, right? We know Singletary will be the lead back and get the majority of the work. So I get you there. There are two backfields I'm not touching at all this week. It's the Commanders against the Buccaneers, and then the Cowboys against the Browns. No, thank you. I don't want to deal with the Commanders. How much is Austin Eckler involved? And also the Bucks were a great run defense last year, especially like they held running backs to the third fewest fantasy points per game last season. The Browns can be run on, but also like just who's going to get the majority of the carries. And at home, the Browns defense is much better than on the road. So like, no, thank you. There's no way you need to start Ezekiel Elliott in week one.
Yeah, these situations are really ugly at this point because it could be all over the board in terms of who gets the key touches in certain situations. So, yeah, let's take a wait and see. Hopefully these coaches will give us some clarity on the usage, which will be important going forward in all these situations. I'll double you up, Michelle, and add two more teams to this mix. I'm going to say the Panthers. I don't want to invest in Chuba Hubbard. I mean, the Saints are typically a good defense, especially at home. So I don't know what you're going to get from this Panthers offense. They hardly put the first team on the field. I'm going to wait for Jonathan Brooks and hope he has some impact at some point. But again, that's the backfield I'm avoiding here on the road. And then the Chargers one. I have no idea what to expect from the Chargers because, again, they didn't play anybody of note at any point. So I didn't know how the usage was going to play out between Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. I'm not quite sure how this game script plays out. You think if they're playing from ahead, Edwards in. If they're behind, Dobbins might be in, but I have no idea, right? This looks like a very close nip and tuck game with the Raiders where they're going to have to grind it out. So welcome to Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman football with the Chargers. It's going to be a little bit ugly. So I don't want really to invest too much in that game. And some people don't like Zamir White, but again, Zamir White on the other side, at least it's going to be a volume-based play. So again, some of those you have to just do in week one, but these split backfields where we have no idea, just pass and hope for having some idea of what to do better in week two.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any reason to have to play a Chargers running back yet. I will say, like, I think Gus Edwards could be fine. I'm open to playing him if you desperately need to. And yeah, Zamir White should be in your lineup this week. I think he should have a really solid week,
Yeah.
a good volume share, like you mentioned. We have some quarterbacks and tight ends we still need to get to for our fades of the week, and there's some big names with some tough matchups, and we gotta discuss: are we gonna brave it out and still plug them into our lineups or actually sit them in week one? We'll get to that to end today's show right after a quick break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And look, we know NFL teams are like small businesses. They're trying to put together the right mix to have winning results all season long. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. With LinkedIn, you're not getting just a job board. You're getting a source to help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier for you. They've even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should be one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman, Tyler Rowland, kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, and detailed breakdowns, and all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman, Tyler Rowland, and the barber, Tony Wiggins, your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Very first up on our quarterback fades, it has to be Mr. Joe Burrow going up against the Patriots. It's not even so much as this matchup is against the Patriots, right? Because, like, they weren't a dominant defense last year. They don't have Bill Belichick anymore, but they still did allow the second fewest passing touchdowns. It's the fact that how high scoring is this game going to be? And Burrow in week one over the last 2 seasons has been atrocious. And does that happen again with him coming off yet another injury, this last season and coming back from that? Who knows? Jamar Chase, is he playing? Who knows, right? So lots of question marks here. What are you doing with Joe Burrow in week one?
Yeah, I mean, if you drafted him there as high as QB6 or QB8, you're going to have to play him, right? I mean, that's a tough thing about getting these guys that are pocket passers. There's like, you don't have like another avenue if they don't put in the numbers that you need and get the 2 touchdowns. It's essentially what you're looking for in a lot of these matchups. So I think he'll be okay. I think he has a good shot at 2 touchdowns, especially if Chase plays with T. Higgins. So keep that in mind. That's what we're looking for. It could be a 250-2 type of ceiling, which is not juicy, right? I mean, we want a little bit more than that. I just don't see a lot of resistance from Jacoby Brissett and the Patriots. Like, they're not going to turn this into a shootout. So that's the other thing that you have to keep in mind with Burrow. I think he's going to be underwhelming, but I still could see a scenario where he finishes in the top 12 this week, but definitely not in the top 5, top 6. He's not going to be there. I think he's more of a back-end QB1 at best in this matchup against the Patriots.
Yeah, the thing with Joe Burrow, and we're talking about the Bengals offense, if we have their running backs fading and Burrow, like someone's going to score in the Bengals offense,
Yeah.
right? They're going to put up at least 20 points against the Patriots. So either Burrow or Moss or Chase Brown, someone has to come through here with some fantasy points. Now, Brock Purdy also gets a very unfortunate matchup in week 1. At least it's a home game, but it's against the Jets. The Jets allowed the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks last year. The Ravens allowed the second fewest last year. And we saw Purdy, what a disaster he was in that Christmas game last year against the Ravens with his 4 interceptions. And that was a home game as well for Purdy. So I don't know. And I will say this is kind of a fun question because this works. I have one league where I don't have waivers, so you have to draft multiple quarterbacks. I have Joe Burrow and Brock Purdy as my 2 quarterbacks. Which one would you go with, Vinny? Help me out.
I think Joe Burrow is a little bit safer because he's at home and the Patriots stink. So I think they'll be a worse defense than we think. Where I know the Jets defense is going to be good. There's no question about it. And the 49ers, as we mentioned, the matchup is much better for the running game, right? And you also figure it could be low scoring because I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to light up the 49ers on the other side. So it's going to be more a grind it with McCaffrey and Hall type of game on both sides. So you might get fortunate with 2 short touchdowns. And again, anybody can put in 2 short touchdowns, but really what the separator we have to look at then, because that's inconsistent, is the yardage. Do you expect a lot of downfield passes from Purdy? He's an excellent downfield passer, but if he's under pressure, Brandon Aiyuk is blanketed here. It's going to be a lot of shorter passes, dump offs to McCaffrey, or just handoffs to McCaffrey, right, in this game. So, again, I don't see him getting A, volume, B, having effectiveness under pressure. So those are 2 things that I do not see happening for Purdy. So, again, we drafted him. He actually faded a bit to the borderline, right, of QB 11, 12, 13. So he's a guy that you can sit if you've got some other options. And hopefully you do, because again, we've talked about some depth guys, Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford. You should have one of those guys that you can play instead of Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I definitely think Brock Purdy could be on your bench this week. And if he goes off, oh, well, you have a great quarterback the rest of the year, right?
Yeah.
But there's just other guys that can put up what Purdy can put up in much better matchups, right? And then another, like Dak Prescott might be a guy you need to sit in week 1. It's hard to just take everything from last year, but we're heading into week 1, right? And there is no units that had a bigger split versus home and away than the Cowboys offense. There is no defensive unit that had a bigger split than the Browns defense in points per game allowed last year. Like the Browns are home. They were the best defense in the NFL when they were at home last year. Well, the Cowboys just fell apart on the road. And you saw that with Dak Prescott's fantasy points. He averaged 25 fantasy points per game at home, 16.0 fantasy points per game on the road last season. And now you're playing against the Browns, who allowed not even 10 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks last year at home, 9.9. How do you play him?
Yeah, it's very hard to say he's going to have a big game. Again, and the other side, it seems to be we're having a lot of defenses play each other that are really good, just like the Jets 49ers game. The Cowboys defense is pretty good. Now, they're not as good because I think Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer drop off. They lost a few pieces. Deron Bland is not playing. So I think the Browns have a little bit more ways to move the ball a little bit more consistently here with Deshaun Watson, Jerome Ford, and Amari Cooper in the revenge game. Now, on the other side, I don't necessarily see a lot. I think CeeDee Lamb can torch the secondary. He can line up in the middle of the field, and they've got some youth there, but you should see a lot of, I think Martin Emerson is the guy in the middle. So they will definitely get him open. And I could see CD, much like we talked about Justin Jefferson, having like 7 catches for 150. But then I could see the quarterback struggling a little bit on the front end, right? Where's his weapons? It's tough for his weapons to get open beyond CeeDee Lamb in this game, the running game. We don't like that with Ezekiel Elliott. And keep in mind, new offensive line. There's a lot of things changing here. No Tyler Smith, we know, or Tyler, I say Tyron Smith. There's
Yeah.
Tyler Smith still in the lineup. Tyron Smith is gone. So they're trying to break in a new left tackle. They have a new center. How's this all going to play out here, right? So Tyler Smith is going to be leaned on a lot because he's still there. And you look at Terrence Steele. Can he hold up against Myles Garrett, right, in this front? Don't forget about Dalvin Tomlinson. Like, he can push the pile in the middle. So a lot of pressure is going to come at Dak Prescott in this game. Inside, outside, are his guys going to get open other than CeeDee Lamb? I don't see that happening.
And with everything you just said, that's why Jake Ferguson's on our list for a fade at the tight end position, right? The Browns allowed the second fewest fantasy points to the tight end position last year. The Cowboys aren't putting up a bunch of points on the road against the Browns' dominant defense at home. It's hard to play Jake Ferguson in week 1. He is someone I'm still willing to just throw in because, like, the tight end position's not deep, right? You're not going to find a lot of great guys on the waivers. Would you get brave enough to play your boy Cade Otton over Jake Ferguson in week 1?
Yeah, that's going to be tough because I think Ferguson will get the targets in this one, and maybe he'll see the ball a little bit more because of the way the coverage is and the pressure is for the Browns. But the Browns were just too good against the tight end, right? I know the Commanders are going to be weakened for sure. So, again, if you're on the fence about these two guys, I'd say go with Cade Otton and just play him because I don't expect you're not going to miss out on a big game from Jake Ferguson. He's not doing the 3 touchdowns he had against the Packers in the playoffs. It's not going to happen in this one. So, again, these back-end tight ends are really tough. The same game, I don't really like David Njoku against the Cowboys. I think Njoku is going to sadly miss Joe Flacco a lot this season and not be involved as much. So I think those are my 2 fades that I would consider a lot at tight end this week.
Yeah, I would go with Njoku over Jake Ferguson. You probably don't have that choice, but if you do, I do like Njoku a little bit more than Ferguson. I'll say one last guy to hit on here that I'm not playing this week. It's Brock Bowers. Rookie tight ends don't do anything in week 1. So rookie tight ends in week 1 over the last 10 seasons, there has been 2 guys to score more than 6 fantasy points in week 1. It was TJ Hawkinson in 2019 and randomly Will Disley in 2018. They both had good games as a rookie in week 1. The rest just pointless, right? Even Sam Laporta last year, with how good of a season he had, he scored 6.4 fantasy points in week 1. That was tied for the 4th best among all rookie tight ends in week 1 over the last 10 seasons. That's how little that they do in week 1. I'm not starting Brock Bowers. I don't care if I miss out on a huge week. Fine. Like, that means I have an amazing rookie tight end that I can start to trust. But like the risk, he's going to have a historical performance to help you win in week 1. And I'm not taking that risk.
And he's been hurt all the time. I mean, he's missed a lot of time here. So if he's out there, I just don't know what you're going to expect. That's another team I'm not sure what you'll get in the passing game between him and Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. But I think this is more of a wide receiver game here for the Raiders because, again, the Chargers secondary is kind of a weakness here all over the field a little bit more. I think you'll see a lot more from their front 7 with Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh there. So I think they'll be a little bit solid and shore things up a little bit in that type of coverage here. So, and you have Derwin James, of course, looming, who's had a history taking out Travis Kelce when healthy in his career. So that's another thing to consider. So not a very good matchup or a good history there, thanks to Michelle's information on rookie tight ends to trust Brock Bowers in week 1.
Yep. If you listen to anything, I feel like that one's important, right?
Yeah.
That is it for our fades of the week. We will be back tomorrow, going through some like good DFS plays, some good prize picks, player projections to choose from. It'll be a fun episode. We'll also always do our draft at the end, our FanDuel draft. So you won't want to miss that. Everyone, enjoy your night because we have football. So enjoy the Chiefs versus the Ravens. I don't even know who I'm rooting for. Who are you rooting for, Vinny?
I'm rooting for a lot of fantasy points. That's what we're doing here. So that's what we want. Bring it on for everybody. And let's get everyone off to a good start in week 1.
Yes. Have a good night, everybody. Bye, y'all.